Hello, the Outlands, and welcome to Peering at the Defense. I am Ian Raven, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I'm super tired today. So also haven't had a chance to make the sort of outline that I like to make ahead of these things. So one of two things is going to happen. We're either going to go wildly off the rails, or I'm just going to fall asleep. Hopefully neither of those are terribly problematic. But despite all that, I'm joined tonight by one of the premiers of our order, and somebody who, when I moved to this kingdom, I ended up being compared to favorably vis-a-vis Footwork. And then I actually got defensive and went, yeah, all right. Welcome, Domin to Alsace.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, doing well.
I know the weather has not been kind to you. You had been under it for a bit, but hopefully you're hale and hearty again.
For a good cause, and yes, recovering just fine. So
excellent. So, as I mentioned, normally I like to try and get an outline together. Or a bit of a miscommunication. So we're just going to try and feel these questions out as we go and see where we can go with it. So I figured I'd start with what got you into the SCA? What started you? What hooked you? What kept you coming back?
So I was introduced to the SCA quite a number of years ago when I was in California, and a coworker of mine held practice at his house, and I went over, and he tried to get me in armor, and I was 120 pounds, and he was much, much larger, and all I saw was that he wanted to hit me with a stick. That didn't seem like a great plan to me. So turned out that years later, I decided I wanted to get into fencing, and I Googled around and said, oh my God, SCA does fencing. And he'd never mentioned that to me. So I showed up at my first fencing practice, and it was fantastic, and that's what I stuck around for.
That's pretty cool. I always like hearing people have a positive first fencing practice.
Yes.
Because mine was sort of the opposite of it.
My first fencing practice, I had just gone to the doctor, and they had taken quite a bit of blood, and I showed up and was very woozy, so I couldn't actually fence. But my second fencing practice was quite good.
There you go.
So I met Don Jean-Eric, and he put a sword in my hand, and yeah, I was hooked.
It's starting to sound like a familiar story in this kingdom. I met Jean-Eric, and he made me fence. I'm like, I don't have that experience, but it's an interesting thing to see who's influencing who at what point, and that's kind of cool. So you took a while to get back into the SCA?
It was about a 5-year gap between being introduced and being and finding out that there was fencing. My friend Gellir actually tried to get me to Great Western War, and he was, as I mentioned, quite a bit larger than me, so he handed me a T-tunic and said, here, put this on, we're going to go. And I put it on my head, and his shoulders were his neck was wider than my shoulders, and it fell to the floor. And, I said, I'm sorry, Bill, I can't wear your dress. And so they went without me. So, but yeah, so I regret missing out on that. But the nice thing is that basically I started in the Outlands, so I'm an Outlander, and not from anywhere else. This is where I'm from. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. So you happened to, after the kingdom was official.
Oh yes, only 19 years ago. So
okay. Because I'm pretty sure that when I started, it was still a principality I had heard of, but also my early Adenvelt experience was very, very limited. But I had heard of Outlands, and then completely forgot about it because I moved to the East, and it was years later before I heard about it again and went, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I've played in quite a number of kingdoms visiting, and I've lived in 2, and the Outlands is definitely my favorite place.
Which other kingdom did you live in?
Drakenwald.
Okay. So where were you there?
For a year. So
Oh, that's cool. That's
That
cool.
was that was about 10 years ago. So I love Drachenwald as well. Great people and amazing sites. But they're not the Outlands.
They are not. They do have Alexander, but
They do. We traded places.
oh, okay. So that's where you started. Uh, what would you say would be where you are right now, and what got you? What was the path that brought you to where you stand?
So what I discovered after joining the SCA was not only was there fencing and fighting and archery and all of those things, but that I could make things. And I've always made things. I've always taken things apart since I can remember and tried to put them back together and put them in different ways. So, my before I showed up at my first event, I went out and found some leather and made some shoes and made a doublet and made everything, and showed up in completely terribly handmade stuff, but it was all made because that's what that I thought you were supposed to do, and that's what appealed to me. So when I wasn't fencing, I learned how to make things that were required for fencing, and got into metalwork and swords and all the clothes required and everything else, and basically, anytime I saw something that was interesting, I would learn how to do it or learn how to make it. And there was always somebody around who would help me or show me or introduce me to somebody or whatever. So, you know, the fencing brought me here. The making things really cemented my place and desire to be here. And then I found out that I have thousands of friends all around the world, a lot of whom I haven't even met yet. And
Right.
that was really the amazing thing. So I travel for work quite a bit. So I would show up at random practices or events or whatever. And by the end of the day, I would have a dozen friends that I didn't have that morning. And that's really what made me stick around and what made me want to help the society grow and do for it what it was doing for me. And so I'd say that's really what drove me to be here.
That's great. That's great. Uh, Now, did you always have the persona focus that you have, or did you go through elements there,
No, I I,
changes?
uh, I had a pretty good idea of basically I started with what clothes do I want to wear? Okay, what names do I need to fit in those clothes? I want to wear French and German. Okay, Alsace fits. That works. So I've never had a huge focus on developing my persona. It's been more of a gradual process. But this is the name I originally registered a month into the SCA, and the persona I registered, and I've just sort of grown the persona as I've grown into my understanding of who Domin would have been and what it means to be Domin in the SCA.
That's great. So that leads me to the next thing is, I mean, if you've been working on what it means to be Doma, what does that mean for you to be a peer?
Um, that was quite a jump. So I've always wanted to be a white scarf. That was the thing I wanted to do. But the idea of being a laurel or a master of defense, those were wishful thinking. Those were dreams. It would be nice, but I didn't give nearly as much thought into what the implications of that were until it actually happened. Um, and the laurel was interesting. It was nice, but they're an established order. I didn't make any significant changes or anything. Hopefully, I've made contributions, but I wasn't going to be defining what the laurel was. The Master of Defense was an entirely different beast. I'm honored to be one of the premiers, but the idea of um, when they handed it to me, and now we have to figure this thing out. At the time, the three of us, it was overwhelming. And there's been a lot of positive aspects to that. I've gotten to help really lay out and influence what the order means in the Outlands, and meet a lot of other similar premiers and newer members around the world and get their understanding of what fencing is and should be and where the order should go, how we should act, what we should focus on, all of that kind of thing. But there's also some negative aspects to it. that I have to be a little more careful about what I say, who I do, who I say things to. I can't be a jerk on the field, or I can't be too much of a jerk on the field. Everything everything
little
carries a
bit of a
little.
jerk as a
Yeah,
treat.
yeah. Everything carries a little bit more weight, uh, and so it's not quite as free as I used to be when I was a nobody. But that weight is the responsibility I get for the privileges of being in this order, and I think it's well worth it. It was just a shock how much change there was in there.
Yeah, that's, I mean, certainly uh, for a young order like that, there is, I mean, there are 17.5 of us. There's not a lot to look back to and say, well, this is how we've done this. What does this mean? We are the ones saying, this is what this gets to mean. And I think that's, yeah, you're right. That's an interesting weight to have in addition to knowing that everything you do is magnified and has more meaning.
Yeah, and it's not just the negative things that I might say or hurt somebody's feelings or whatever. Those are very important, but it's as simple as I one day took my rubber chicken out on the field and somebody fell down and I jumped on him and beat him with my rubber chicken and we were both giggling up a storm. But then I saw other people taking that exact same thing too far, and realized that I was the influence there and really need
Right.
to tone down my my actions in some cases, that I might be an influence that's not always positive, and I really should strive to be.
Which on the one hand is a shame, but on the other hand, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Uh, you can't do that without having somebody say, oh, it's okay.
Yes. And it wasn't okay when I did it. It just,
Right.
but everybody assumes it is.
I have a distressing sounding flamingo that's rubber chicken-esque.
Yes.
And I don't think I would hit anyone with it really, but there's always that this person needs to be hit with a rubber chicken effect.
Yes. I may also have headbutted somebody in the middle of a tournament and been thrown out of the tournament, but I made sure to go and actually congratulate the marshals afterwards for doing their job.
You should have
Yes.
thrown me out. Nice.
It was not in anger. We were locked up and I just tapped her in the head with my head, but still, it was intentional contact in a way that was not allowed.
Right.
So.
Right. I had a new fencer do that at one point. We're going for a second authorization, but we need to see what you do with this form. And I just got right up in her face, and she looked at what was going on. She looked at our bind, and she looked at me, and open palm strikes me in the face, and I went, yeah, all right, let's step back from that, maybe.
I had Jean-Eric bind me up in a similar way when I was prepping for my very first authorization, pushed me against the wall and bound me. And I'm like, well, now what do I do? And he just stood there and eventually reached down and tickled me until I fell over. It was probably the most humiliating thing I've ever had in my fencing career. So the rest of the story, let me finish it. The first time he did that, he kneed me in the crotch and I complained about it. So the second time he tickled me, which was far more humiliating than the knee. So
I could see where that would be the case. I could see that being the case. I'm kind of pleased that my current student, when Master Adam did something similar to him in an authorization, just kind of looked at the situation and went, hey, hold. That's not right. You can't do that. Who says? Well, the rules say. Good. Okay, moving on. You pass. I was really proud of that one.
Nice.
Okay, it does look like we have a question here. Somebody who would like to know who the premiers for this kingdom were. And now I know the answer, but I'm not being interviewed, so I will hand that to you.
So Master Gavanen was offered first. then myself, a few minutes later, and then Master Christopher was offered. And we were actually elevated at 2 different times, Gavanen and myself, and then Christopher later, because we couldn't make all the timing work.
Okay.
So and I
How
had,
far apart?
it was a couple of months between. Gavanen and I were offered a month before coronation, and we did our elevation at coronation.
No pressure.
I was offered, and the next day I got on a plane and went to England, and then Germany, and then India, and then Thailand, and then Japan, Canada, and then back, just in time to have 2 days to work on my garb and everything else. So that was
okay.
I was jet lagged and dressed the best I could in 2 days, and we made it through.
Wow.
So we had our vigil at my house the night before. We were going to do it outside in a tent, but it was pouring cats and dogs. I had, almost a foot of water slapping up against my house. So we stole my children's bedrooms, and Gavanen and I did our vigils together in my children's bedrooms.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the sort. I mean, I would say that's the sort of thing you get with a new peerage, but I know personally that there are stories I've been told that involve that for things even as august as the Pelican. So
we were both laurels at this point. We both had proper vigils before and knew how it should be done. We just had no time to do it.
Okay. All right. And then months later.
I think it was 2 months later, Christopher at fencing camp.
Okay. All right. It's a good place to do it.
Yeah. It's a beautiful sight.
I know I got to see the premieres of Trimaris made, and they did that on 2 separate days. They did 3 and then a 4th, but they all did their vigil together. And they had a massive tent with walls separating it into 4 quadrants, and they all did a fighting vigil, which was very cool, because at that point I still didn't know what I would possibly have to say to someone at a vigil. So I went in to see Davius and said, you know most of what I'm going to say because I've spent your whole career saying it to you. Let's go fight.
Yeah.
And it was wonderfully freeing to be able to do that. So
I wish we had the time and space to do that.
Sure. Or the lack of rain, perhaps.
Yes. I think we've all found a time to go out afterwards or some before and have open fights, but not quite a fighting vigil.
Did you fight a prize?
I did not fight a proper prize for this. It was difficult to arrange in the middle of winter or the middle of early spring.
That's fair.
I have gotten to fight several prizes for various things over the years, and they're fantastic. My very favorite type of fight.
Yeah, I have to say, having now done one, and it wasn't the first one because I took part in Wolfgang's.
Oh, nice.
I thought that was a neat honor to have had, especially early in fencing here for me. And it was something that I looked at and said, oh, I want to have that. That's a thing that I would like to see happen.
I researched and set up a prize based on the London Masters of Defense early in my fencing career as an assignment from Jean-Eric, just to have one done. And it was terribly fun. And then I got to fight another at Raglan Castle to join the Drachenwald Academy of Defense, which was the best thing ever.
Oh, I would have to think so. I mean, gosh. Yes. Now I have to ask, being cadetted to who I was cadetted to. So what were your sources for your London Masters? I imagine there's a particular paper that had to have been somewhere in there. Because I was cadetted to Dylan, and Dylan did a lot of work on that.
Yes, I did not do very much research, so I found some basic sources and went with it, hung up some posters and things like that. So, and we only did sword. I couldn't come up with spears or anything else.
Well, we've
It's very
only just
disappointing.
gotten there now.
Yes. Yeah, it would
Uh,
be great to actually do a full proper prize on an, you say, a raised stage with multiple weapons. We should make that happen.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that was the closest I could get to was we have 5 basic forms.
Hmm.
So I am going to fight everybody who wants to fight me in all 5 of the forms.
Yes.
Uh, and I have never been more joyously tired than after 85 5-pass fights with
Yes.
everything I had. I'm look, my 2 students were there. They both kicked my ass doing things that I had taught them how to do. So
Yeah, I
that
believe I
was a
fought you.
that was a huge source of pride.
Nice.
Uh, so yeah, I think that the prize is a really neat element of that.
Yes.
Uh,
I have made my students fight a prize before they officially became cadets. Every one of them, and at the end, of course, they all get to fight together against whoever wants to charge at them, and that's the best part.
what, like melee or
Exactly, the
okay?
three or two or whatever of them dying together. It's a great way to build a bond
It is.
over and
It
over.
is. Yep, we're just gonna do it again. Yeah, unfortunately, I had put off taking my first apprentice uh, because things were not lining up right, and then everything was remaining closed. So I haven't had that chance to do that, but I should, as soon as I have that chance,
Absolutely.
make that available to him. I think he'd get a kick out of it.
Yes.
It looks like we have another question here, if you'd like to take that from. Now it says Don Antoine, but I'm pretty sure that should be vigilant. Uh, with the order being very multifaceted, martial, arts and sciences, and service, where do you feel the strengths are, and where do you feel it needs to focus to be better as a
so
leader in the community?
so I wouldn't say that the order is really multifaceted. Everything you're describing is really part of being a martial peerage. So arts and sciences and service, of course, part of being every peerage. Uh,
Correct.
the the difference in ours is really just the type of martial activities, unarmored versus armored, in my opinion. Um, and
And I would agree.
where we need to focus is really in all of those aspects. Um, I think a big difference between what most of the known world saw as White Scars and Masters of Defense is really trying to take someone and make them a great fencer, and encourage them to do everything else, but really the focus on being a great fencer. That was my job as a White Scarf in my cadets. My job as a peer to my students is take someone and turn them into a leader, if they want that. To turn them into somebody who's going to contribute, hopefully more than I have, to the SCA, to really become everything that they can or want to be in the SCA, not just focus on their fencing, but turn them into a future peer. Um, so
Good SCA citizenship.
exactly. So to be better as an order, we need to really go beyond what some of us were even doing as white scarves, and really focus on, uh, you know, make them a well-rounded individual inside of the SCA. I also personally, you know, think that the relationships with my students go a little bit beyond even the SCA. I know a lot of people's do, but it's helping them grow as a person, and not just focusing on the aspects that apply to the SCA. Now, as far as the community in general, it's exactly that. Maybe not on a personal level as you would do with your students, but we're meant to be the leaders of this community, to both encourage growth of the individuals in it, um, from a martial aspect, from a personal aspect, from arts and sciences, service, everything else, um, but to really inspire them to be more than we have been so far. To research better, to dress better, to fight better, to serve the crown better, to do everything in the SCA that we do, but hopefully with a little more um, grounding than necessarily we had, or the people who came before us had. Standing on the
Right.
shoulders of giants and all that. Not to, okay, maybe I'm a little closer here than I was a year ago, but I'm a little larger than I was a year ago.
But I mean, you're not wrong. We have some people in our pasts with enormous shoes, regardless of the actual size of feet. They had different opportunities and obstacles, but as we've kind of gone through that, we've gotten better at understanding what the manuals meant, or better at rapier simulators. Certainly, we've gotten better at dressing the part on the field, and I think that was the mantra of the ogre was always, dress better, travel more, because you are already, if you're even thinking about being looked at for that, you're already showing the prowess.
Yes.
And I think that being able to say, your prowess is here, let's see if we can push that and make it more in line with what the period philosophy was. Your clothing is good, but we can make it excellent and really make you have stepped out of that plate.
Yes.
And in addition to that, there's people around that we have to take care of, and there are activities in this society that all of us can take advantage of and bring something to, get stuff out of. Certainly, I've gotten a lot out of being an illuminator, and I'd like to think that I've given something back to people with the efforts I've made to push people towards better period references, better period specific, persona specific artwork that makes that scroll that much more for that person.
Yes. I really enjoy teaching people to make their own clothes, especially when it's a challenging piece that maybe I don't know anything about when we started. We get to sit down and learn together and figure out, okay, this Persian versus Turkish, what's the difference? 12th century versus 14th. I have no idea. Let's figure it out. And that fits into what I said earlier. I love to make things. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm going to make something. It may as well be something that has purpose.
See, and that's the other cool thing. And I was just talking about this group to somebody last night who was dumbfounded because I could point out people who made scrolls. We've got a guy in our group who's made a Viking boat. It lives in his garage. He sails it on multiple occasions. Is a vigilant for the laurel for that sort of work. And I could say, yes, this person does this, and this person makes these things, and this person makes these things, and just watch their jaw drop, because who does that? Well, we do.
Yes. Lots of people make lots of things. Just, I like to say the SCA gives me a focus. So it sort of combined all of my hobbies. I was doing woodwork and metalwork and all kinds of things before I joined the SCA, sewing and everything else. It just, hey, now I can do them all and call it one hobby. I don't have 20, I have one. So.
Right. A single catch-all hobby.
Exactly.
Okay. If you'd like, we could go for another question here.
Sure.
Tangentially related here.
Sure.
Lady Alora would like to know, as a member of the defense, what do you say to help encourage female or minority fighters who are either just starting out or who may have hit a plateau in their fighting? Which is certainly something that I personally have been trying to address while in our downtime, so that we can come back and be better at it.
Yeah, so one of my roles in my professional life is to actually mentor people with a particular focus on underrepresented minorities and women in technology. So I have a little bit of experience with this sort of thing in a professional context, and in the SCA, more than half of my students have been women, uh, for whatever reason, and I've seen a lot of the type of problems that women fighters have to face and go through, um, and I don't have an answer for a lot of them, besides um, really don't do it alone. There are people here who want you here and want to encourage you and want you to grow and to really be into this. Sure, there may be some people you feel like don't want you here, but they're the minority, and some of us will help you through with those people. Um, so that that's the beginning, and that's the dealing with bullying and things like that. Unfortunately, as far as dealing with physical differences and mental differences on the way we approach fighting, every person is different. But on average, the average guy is maybe a little more aggressive than the average girl. And some of that is just a different approach in training and a different understanding with what happens at various frustration levels and things like that. And so I try to be understanding and try to approach those people when I notice them getting into those states and try to just help them through them. I don't have general advice on you should say this to women because everybody's different. You know, I know
Sure.
some women fencers who are far more aggressive than I am. So I'm not going to say women aren't aggressive or anything like that. But it's understanding the different physical approaches to how we hold a sword, how we move, what we can do, and the different mental aspects of fighting. What does an adrenaline reaction do to this person versus that person on average, and
Oh,
what
it
do
looks
those
like
look
everybody's
like?
breaking up.
Um, oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
We still there?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, it sounds like you're back also.
Okay.
Please continue.
um, did you get that? So I think that was my answer if it came through.
No,
So
you know what? I'm not getting all. Am I breaking up too? Okay, great.
okay.
Looks like we're
So
having a little bit of technical audio problem here.
yeah. So in summary, understanding, support, and really keeping an eye out for those people, approaching them and helping them if they need it, giving them space if they need it, and making sure they know that you're there when they need. So while Ian's sorting his thing out, it appears you can hear me. I'm going to back up one question real quick. Um, we talked about people who came before us and people who, um, shoes we're trying to fill. Um, and it's something that's always bothered me about this order is that there are people who should be here, absolutely, undoubtedly should be here, but aren't going to be because the nature of the peerage. Um, and it really bothers me. The people who taught me, the people who taught them, the people who built the community that we're enjoying, and the acceptance that we have, and made it possible for us to make this peerage. A lot of them will never be recognized by it in the way that I think that they should, um, and so it is beholden to us as members of this community um, to really do our best to try to live up to their image and try to make it the order that they would have made it, or at least maybe not execute it the same way, but the earn the type of respect that they would have done if they were here and had established this order before us.
Hmm. Well, I'd have to agree, although I don't think anybody can hear me agreeing
I can.
quite properly here. trying to cut down on anything that I think that's running in the background here. Okay, well, it looks like we might be back. I know that certainly what we've got here is, building on what you were saying, is a chance to make this an order that is what they would kind of think it should be. There are plenty of people I can think of who aren't there, and I'm kind of surprised that certainly I'm surprised I'm there before them. And I think that for myself, the thing that I'm trying to do coming back is make that path, if I can make it easier for somebody else, that's my job at that point, is make the path for the next set of society citizens easier. And I think that's,
sure
that's certainly a lofty goal.
I'm not sure easier is the right word. Certainly there are things that we ran into that we shouldn't have, but I do firmly believe that you get into this what you get out, or you get out what you get in.
Okay, no, that's fair.
Think more rewarding, maybe. That they should be able to come in and have more available to them than we did. And they should be able to get out even more with the same level of input.
Okay. All right. So I don't see that we have any other questions going at the moment. So I had a couple of quick, like lightning round questions that I figured I'd throw your way.
Sure.
What is your favorite form to fight?
My favorite form is single rapier.
He says, not knowing if there's an answer coming.
So, it's not my best form, but I like the purity of just a single sword and lines.
That's fair. I'm not looking for best form. I'm looking for the thing that you like the best. Yeah. So
Yes.
that being your favorite, I can buy.
I also love some saber, but that's really turns more into bashing.
What's your favorite form to teach?
Sword and dagger is my favorite to teach. I think it is the ideal form for fighting rapier, and it makes sense together, and I can explain it well.
Okay. All right. And now this was a question that I've asked everybody. It was suggested by people who I spoke to. How often do you really do footwork drills?
So I haven't been fencing lately because everything's been going on. But honestly, between 3 and 5 days a week. So I do modern fencing practices when I can. I do HEMA practices and SCA practices. And footwork is the most important thing. So I also do them at the gym. So
it's places where you get funny looks, I would presume, as opposed to in a fencing class.
It's a gym. Nobody cares.
That's fair.
And
I'm
not exactly shy.
There's a certain level of that comes with where we are in a fencing career, I would guess.
Exactly.
I know that for my form, mobility is like the utmost of utility. It's the thing that is everything else hangs on. Yep. So I would agree that footwork's the most important thing.
Yeah, distance is time.
I know that at my peak, when I was at my absolute best, I was hitting 4 practices a week and 5 if I could manage it.
Yep.
and that takes a bit out of everybody else around me as well.
Absolutely.
Which certainly was why I didn't start once I moved here. I didn't start right up because I didn't have that kind of time to take away from the rest of my family.
Yeah. For a few years, I was hitting 2 in Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, and Boulder as often as I could, up to 5 a week.
Gosh, that's a lot of driving.
I like to drive, so.
Also, that's a positive then. I having done some of that driving, it's an incredible distance to go for multiple practices a week.
But fencing is really
and for
amazing.
me, it's 4 hours on top of whatever else that travel time is.
Yeah, but honestly, nothing makes me feel, well, very few things make me feel quite as good as a good night of fencing.
I would agree. It's certainly the thing that keeps me alive.
Absolutely.
So now you had mentioned earlier a little bit of what you miss from before you were somebody. What else do you feel that you kind of wish you had a little of still, because you are not a nobody anymore?
I would really like to take less stuff to an event.
Oh gosh.
I have a storage unit full of things, and they barely fit in my giant truck, and I'm gonna have to add a trailer soon. So I miss being able to go to an event with just my hammock and a bag. I save those for flying trips now.
Okay, all right. Now, are you talking about having lots of stuff just for your camp and kit, or are you bringing stuff for other people?
Oh, no, I don't mind bringing things for other people, but yeah, I'm often taking 2 or 3 camps worth of things, but just for myself. I felt like I really need to make the effort to be a proper peer, and part of that is having a great camp. And with the help of some fantastic friends, I now have a great camp. But that means, I have to carry it, and I have to take a day to set it up. And once it's up, I'm glad it's all there and it's beautiful and comfortable. But I do miss sometimes just having a hammock.
Okay. I know that at one point in our past lives, my wife and I traveled with a 2-person camping tent, like a backpacking tent, which is a very far cry from the 12 by 18 canvas with all of its wood poles and its 12 by 12 fly.
Yes. I spent a raglan because I was flying to England, of course. So I spent a raglan in a backpacking tent, 2-person. So there was enough room for me and then my swords. So it was great.
There you go. Oh, it looks like we have another question here. And this is something that I've been working on a lot to try and wrap my head around myself. Don Maximilian would like to know about period manuals. How do you learn from them, teach from them, and convert the more dangerous sections to SCA use?
So I picked up when I first picked up period manuals, I picked up the freely available ones that were written in English, fought my way through all of the introductions where he was explaining that he wasn't good enough to write this, but the king demanded it, so he would, and he'd do his best, and then finally got to the bits about weapons. And basically looked at the plates, read the text, figured out what I could figure out, went and tried it, figured out that it was completely wrong, or this stuff didn't work with an epee, or whatever else. Fortunately, by the time we got really good simulators, we also started getting really good books. So my first good copy of Capifero was brilliant. It had a good introduction on what some of the terms might mean, how to interpret some of the things. And I was able to, with the help of a bunch of good friends, really start figuring out what some of this stuff meant, and some of it started to work. Look, this geometry actually works. Cavazione actually works. Um, and just built from that. Picked up more and more manuals, started reading things, sought out teachers anywhere I could who were teaching in any weapon form that was even vaguely related, especially Italian, because you know the people that these manuals were written for were not learning in a vacuum. They grew up with swords in their hands of various sorts, and the rapier was just another sword. So I really tried
Right.
to approach it as that. If I didn't have a background in swordsmanship, how am I ever going to learn this thing? Most of these manuals don't talk about how to move your feet because people learning for this manual knew how to move their feet. They knew how to fight with a sword. So where did they learn that? Oh, well, we got to go back to Agrippa or wherever we want to start from and really figure out what are the basics that they would have started with, and then start figuring out how those adapted and applied to these later manuals. And so that's how I approached it. As for the more dangerous sections, I've been thrown more than a few times. I've had my wrist twisted. I've almost broken somebody's wrist trying to disarm that was very effective. And, I've broken a couple ribs, both my own and other people's. And we figured out that a lot of these things really are just dangerous and we should not do them without in the SCA. There are places and times where we can practice that sort of thing and figure out if we can make it safe, but some of them just aren't going to be. Some of them are borderline safe, and we experiment with them and see what doesn't hurt too bad, what we're willing to keep working on, and see if we can eventually learn the control and the technique to do it safely. And of course, lots of people are doing that. That's how we ended up with heavy rapiers. That's how we've ended up with spears and cut and thrust and everything else. It's not really learning how to convert them. It's more learning how to control them. So, and if you can't do it properly with control, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
And that's about, that's about where our rules stand.
Yeah. But some of the things, you can't do them properly. You can't do them properly and controlled at the same time. It's inherently a violent action, and it's going to be done violently. We probably shouldn't do it in the SCA.
Right. I know that I can point at the top two hardest hits I've ever taken. One being something that I apparently triggered in my opponent, and the other being an otherwise beautiful, right from the plate, manual perfect blow that, had I not been hugely over armored in the gorget area, would have finished exactly as it's shown in the manual.
Yeah.
With 8 inches of blade behind my neck.
Yes. Yeah. Basically, I think that we have two choices in fighting. We can play as though we're trying to get first blood, or we can play as though we're trying to put our sword through our opponent. One of those does not translate very well if we want to continue playing with our friends. So
Correct.
We really should not take those deep Fabris lunges from the proper Fabris distance, because that results in their blade being 12 inches out their back.
Right.
So those things we do have to modify, but it's really just more about control than about modification. It's don't wait until they're as close as possible. Wait until they're close enough. Don't lunge with all possible force. Lunge with enough force.
Right. Yeah. Right. And know your weapon and know your distance and know what these things feel like
and be
before you start.
Failure. Your opponent does something
too.
Unexpected. What are you going to do?
In my case, I'm going to look at things and go, what can I do with that?
Well, I'm mid lunge and you jump in instead of jumping backwards like I expected. Well, I shouldn't have my arm and wrist locked. I should have them ready to break. So
yeah, suddenly that distance has collapsed.
Yes.
And and the thing that I can tell everybody, and I do often, is that happens at every level. Because Don Seamus and I, at Battlemore 3 or 4 years ago, we were doing a lovely set of passes, and at the same moment, and we're both left-handed, so the opening presented itself unlike what we usually see, because we're not used to seeing it correctly, sword on the opposite side of the body and all. We both saw the same opportunity. We both failed to bother to clear the same line, and we both lunged and collapsed the distance twice as fast.
Yes.
And I still think I have ribs out from that.
I got a concussion that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always going to happen. But, the best thing we can do is continue to, like you said, expect failure, try and not convert, but understand what the manuals are talking about. And is that a technique that we can use for, in a sport fencing environment that we're going to do multiple times with the same person?
Right. And, are our swords as compliant as they should be? Is our armor as good as it should be? Those are all questions that we should keep asking.
Right.
Our sport is only as safe as we make it. And personally, I want to fight in a t-shirt. I don't want to have to wear 6 layers and everything else, but I'm comfortable with that. And if the sport is not safe enough to support that with somebody at their first time on the field, then we shouldn't be doing it.
That is kind of the core of what we've tried to legislate ourselves to. Because I know there are people who can do things that we say we're not allowed to do. I've watched Master Domin uncork a beautiful lunge at a dead run and just deliver an Eastern touch. And I've also watched people do about half of the same speed and just clobber somebody. Yep. So yeah, there are people out there who can do this, but we have to know that we're trying to do techniques for people who don't know that they can do that, right, and do it safely.
I think I could do a dead run and on ideal footing give you a perfect touch. But what happens if I am not on ideal footing? Suddenly you have a broken rib. I shouldn't do that.
Right. And the thing is that, of all people, I would trust you to do that, but you're going to have to fight somebody at some point that you don't know and trust as well as, somebody who you have fought a whole bunch with and know that they have the utmost control and the philosophy that goes with that.
Absolutely. So I thought of something that back when you asked me what are the other things that I enjoy about being a peer, and that reminded me of a story. I was at Estrella, I don't know, just a few years ago, and it was during a melee where I came around a corner and there was a bunch of dead people and 5 living people, and they came up and threatened me, and I backed up onto a path where they'd have to come one at a time and ask them if they would like honorable combat, and surprisingly they agreed, and so I killed the 5 of them and then continued on my way. And so it was fun and it was good. But the next day, I'm standing waiting to get inspected, and I hear some random person across the field talking about how this Master Domin had killed these 13 people and just like fought 5 of them at a time. And it was the most amazing thing to have somebody embellishing stories about me. It was magical. That was one of my most in the moment sort of experiences in the SCA. So that's one of the best parts about being a peer.
That's pretty great. I mean, I'll take that one and say that's a pretty wonderful thing to be able to say people will do. I don't know that I've had quite enough time to settle into being a peer to get that sort of accolade building yet.
You had it before. I heard of you before you moved here.
Okay, well, all right. I'll retract that then. I do know that there are things that I have heard other people telling a story about, an ill-fated Pennsic Woods battle, and
aren't they all?
Knowing that they were nowhere near the action that occurred, but they heard what happened immediately afterwards because, man, that Easterner was really angry. We could hear him all through the woods. And I start going, yeah, sorry, that was me. I believe the phrase you're looking for is, whoa, you are way too close to throw that shot. That drew blood, too.
Oh, nice.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, it looks like we're inside of 5 minutes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add or embellish on?
I try not to embellish my own stories unless there's a campfire.
That's okay. I can go with that.
So no, I think that's about it. This has been really fun.
Great. I think what may have happened is somebody in my house may have tried to update all of their Steam applications, even though they know that Wednesday is my day to need all of the internet. But no, thank you for powering through that. Thank you for coming and chatting with me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to say that everybody who's watching now, please tune in on May 4th. You can see it down there at the bottom. May 4th for Finn's next Peering at the Chivalry, where he'll be talking to Count Johan. And that's at 6 p.m. I've checked the schedule, so I've double-checked that. So 6 p.m. on May 4th. Please stick around for that one. Thanks, everybody, for coming and watching us. Thank you for the tech wizardry that made it possible for us to bring this to you. And until next time, keep your cards up and keep the pointy end in the other person. Thanks for a great show.
Thank you, everyone.
Looks like I actually finished up early. We have a couple of minutes of dead air now.